Hey guys, Mike here from Movie Nation.
And today, we're going through a 2013 horror crime movie called I Spit on Your Grave 2. The movie begins in a taxi taking Katie Carter going to meet with her modeling agent, Sharon, who tells her she needs better-looking photos to have a good shot at her modeling career. Disappointed, Katie leaves the restaurant for her house. However, on her way out, she sees an ad offering to take free photos of ladies and she copies down the numbers. Upon getting to her house, she meets Jason, who's busy chasing away a mouse. Katie chuckles at her cute neighbor and helps him out of his situation. She sets a trap to effectively catch the mouse. After doing her thing, Katie enters her apartment and settles down. She checks her photo album and places a call to the number she copied earlier. A man picks it on the other end and sets up an appointment with her for her session. He then asks her to take a picture of herself, which she does. After receiving the photos, he texts her an address which she gets to immediately. Getting to the studio, Katie walks in to see Nikolai, Ivan and Georgie taking a picture of a model on stage. Georgie calls Ivan, who walks to introduce himself as the man on the phone earlier. He then discusses the terms and conditions of their agreement and tells her to change into some clothes he picked for her. Katie takes the clothes and proceeds to the bathroom to change. While doing it, she asks Georgie to help her with a zipper. Georgie stares at her aroused as she poses on the stage for the photos. After a hot photo session, Ivan, the photographer, asks Katie to remove her clothes so they can get more skin on the camera. Katie refuses to do this and leaves for her house. Katie finally arrives at home as she despairs over her current situation. The next day, Katie receives a very weird visit after her morning run. Georgie gives her the photos they took of her earlier, which creeps Katie out. She doesn't break her act and collects the photos, thanking Georgie gracefully. By nightfall, Georgie checks out photos of his new obsession, Katie, and proceeds to infiltrate her house. While taking out the trash, Katie leaves a part of her door open. This happens to be a little mistake as Georgie already snuck himself in. She gets back to her apartment, locks the door and goes to sleep. Further into the night, Katie wakes up to see Georgie take pictures of her sleeping. She freaks out, tushes Georgie and runs outside to call for help. Unfortunately, Georgie wakes up and drags her back into the apartment. He ties her up and almost has his way with her. However, Jason, who was in the other room, knocks on her door after hearing her screams. Georgie hides himself and takes out Jason as soon as he enters the apartment. Now in a pool of his own blood, Jason spends his last moments watching his love interest violated right there on the floor by a creep. After several minutes of violating an innocent, Georgie the creep finishes. Only then does he see the horror he's caused. He calls his brother out of fear, reporting the entire thing to him. Ivan and Nikolai come by the apartment moments later. Ivan chastises his dense younger brother as he helps him clean things up. They make use of the infamous bleach solution to clean the blood off the floors and plant Katie's prints on the knife Georgie used to take out Jason. Before the scene ends, however, Ivan takes some substance from his pocket and forces it into Katie's mouth. Upon swallowing it, Katie passes out. The next scene then shows Katie in a box as she's transported, all shaky and all. By the time she wakes up, she sees Nikolai on top of her, having his way with her. She tries to push him away only to find out she was already chained to a pole. Georgie comes in and stops his brother from violating Katie. Katie then asks for some water and Nikolai pisses on her. Georgie chastises his brother for doing what he did. Thankfully, Ivan walks in and disperses them. The duo leaves the room and Ivan follows suit. Katie screams and keeps screaming as she wishes to be free from the family of creeps. As she despairs over her situation, the scene ends. In the next scene, Ivan forces their captive up as he throws water at her. He then asks her to wash herself up for Valko, their father. Katie becomes restive and the boys force something into her mouth. Then, they leave Georgie, who cleans her up. After cleaning her up, he walks out of the room to get some clothes for Katie. Now seeing they are gone, Katie throws up the drug and sleeps off. Georgie gets back with her clothes and wakes her up. He releases her from her chains and helps her up to put on her clothes. After being fully clothed, she knocks out Georgie with a bucket and escapes the room through the window. She runs through town till she gets to the road with people staring at her acting like a lunatic. Eventually, the cops arrive and help her to the station. While in the cop car, one of the cops tells her she's in Bulgaria. Katie cries out loudly, saying she didn't know how she got from New York to Bulgaria. Meanwhile, Ivan gets wind of the situation and gets alerted. Back at the station, Katie demands to get to the American embassy as her discussion with the detective goes nowhere. Just then, Anna Potov arrives and asks for some time alone with Katie. When she gets it, she talks with Katie, telling her she had a shelter meant for violated women. Katie kept demanding she needs to get to the embassy. However, Anna insists she gets her some clothes and a shower before she gets there. Katie follows her and listens to Anna's invite to her house. Katie agrees to follow her Samaritan to her house. Upon getting there, Anna takes her to the basement and there, she finds Ivan and the boys again. Turns out Anna was Ivan and Georgie's mother. Now back in despair, Katie lets off a scream of frustration. Shortly afterward, Valko, their father, enters with a taser. Anna plays some opera music upstairs as Valko has his way with Katie. He uses the taser many times on Katie's body and watches her scream out loud. After having his way with the poor lady, Ivan walks in and teases Katie, who slaps him in return. Ivan gets annoyed and punches her hard. Moments later, the three boys dig up some dirt to bury Katie in. Katie, who's wounded all over, watches as the boys laugh over her demise. After digging the hole, they carry Katie and put her in a box. Then, they throw her necklace in there with her and greet her goodbye. Inside, Katie feels the dirt hit the outer top of the box as she realizes she has moments left to live. By nightfall, the boys finish covering the hole and put the mattress on the hole. Inside the hole, Katie feels something weird go on. She prays to God to help her out and feels a rumbling at the bottom of the box. Apparently, the boys dug their hole too deep and as a result, Katie falls into the sewer still very much alive. In the next scene, Georgie feels guilty as he receives some comfort from his mother. Meanwhile, Ivan and Nikolai discuss their next move now Katie is gone. Ivan says they can't risk going back to New York as it was too risky for them. Nikolai grumbles as he promises to hurt his other brother, Georgie. Katie wakes up with sewer water in her mouth and finds her way to survival. She waltzes through the sewer tunnels and calls for anybody. Upon hearing nothing from anyone, she continues her journey through the sewers of rats and infections until she gets to a pile of clothes. She takes what she can, including a lighter, and makes a place to sleep at. Moments later, she hears a rumbling sound and finds a bird trapped down in the sewers. Happy Katie catches the bird and eats it for dinner. As she does, she hears some chanting sounds from a distance and checks things out. She then discovers the sound was coming from a church and infiltrates the place. The pastor of the church senses something weird and checks some things splattered on the floor. Katie gets back to the sewers and finds some construction being done there. Then, she gets back to the church and comes across the father who was waiting for her return. He tries to welcome her to the church, but Katie acts unfazed by his gestures. He then offers her clothes and food, which she takes and runs back to her sewer home. There, she munches on some of the bread and explores her new environment. Luckily for her, she finds another exit to a busier part of the city. She makes her way to the American embassy but doesn't seek asylum there. She gets back to the church and is seen staring at the cross. The Reverend Father comes by and offers his help to her, but she refuses and leaves the church. The father chastises Katie, saying she couldn't run from her woes forever, and she responds, "I'm not running." Katie gets back to the hole she fell from and smiles maniacally as she decides her next move. Later during that day, she infiltrates a house and steals some cash from there. Then, she stalks Nikolai by nightfall, following him to his favorite nightclub. The next day, she shows her face to Georgie at a restaurant and urges him non-verbally to follow her to an abandoned house. Dense Georgie does so and is knocked out from above by an angry Katie. At that moment, the father speaks with one of his people in the church, expressing his concerns over what Katie would do to her violators. The man listening to the father asks for a description of Katie and the father gives an apt one. Together, they wonder what an angry woman like Katie could do given the power she has. Up next, Dense Georgie wakes up all tied up to a wall in the abandoned house. Katie comes by and slashes his cheeks and abdomen. She then puts some gunk in the wounds so it catches an infection and Georgie could meet his demise in a slow and disgusting way. Meanwhile, Nikolai parties in his nightclub yet again. He sips some drink brought to him by Katie and feels uneasy. He quickly rushes to the toilet to throw up but meets Katie there. Then, the medicine finally kicks in. He falls down and does nothing as Katie makes him drink the crackhead's toilet. After getting a drink of the gunky toilet water, Nikolai is eliminated. Katie washes her hand and rushes out of the toilet when someone else bangs the door violently. Katie gets back to Georgie and teases him the more as he screams out loud. She picks up a stick and deepens his wounds further. Katie forces some clothes in his mouth and leaves for the church. There, she stalks Valko, who catches her gaze and hurries his wife, Anna, home. Katie lures him down to the sewers and knocks him out from behind. When he comes to, Valko sees that he's already tied down to a bed frame. He receives a taste of his own medicine as Katie uses the same taser he used on her to shock the heck out of him. She does the same technique he did to her back then till he pees his pants and gets fried. Upon finishing things with him, she gets back to Georgie and takes a picture of the pussed out dullard. At that moment, Anna gets home to see her room trashed. While expressing her surprise, she hears the opera music playing in the background and goes to check it out. Then, she's pushed into a hole dug for Katie by you-know-who, Katie. When she comes to, she sees Georgie already meeting his demise from the infections and she shouts out loud. Meanwhile, Ivan arrives back home and sees the entire situation they were in. He gets to the basement and checks it out. The father talks with the detective from earlier and takes him to the sewer Katie crawled out from. Ivan gets to Georgie and gets knocked out from behind by Katie. When he comes to, he finds his balls about to be crushed by Katie and shouts. He then tells Katie that Anna was just like her and Valko didn't stop violating her until Nikolay was born. Katie quickly opens the box Anna was in and chastises her for putting up with the creepy old man. Katie promises to give Anna the same experience as her as she gets back to Ivan. She pulls out his navel and starts crushing his balls little by little. When she finishes her business, the detective from earlier, the one who the father was talking with, comes in and holds Katie at gunpoint. Ivan uses this opportunity to strangle the detective, who's left with no choice but to terminate Ivan. The movie ends as Katie then shows the detective Anna, proceeds to the American embassy and finally walks in there with a smile on her face. Thanks for watching, guys.